was sitting at the table and watching as my cheating wife headed to the bathroom, followed by her AP. Hey Reddit, using a throwaway account because I don't want this associated with my main. My name is Michael and I'm a 32-year-old man. My wife's name is Lily and she's 30 years old. We met in college and dated until we got married about 4 years ago. Things used to be great for us until they weren't anymore. But never would I have expected that she was cheating on me. Like I said before, Lily and I met in college, and from the moment I laid eyes on her, I knew she was the one. Everything just clicked between us, from our shared interests to our sense of humor. Lily was not just beautiful, she was kind-hearted and fun-loving. She made every moment we spent together feel like a blessing. We dated through college, graduated, and eventually tied the knot a few years later. Fast forward to today, we have a wonderful son whom I'll call Sean for privacy. He's 3 years old and the light of my life. I've always been a family guy. I've done everything in my power to provide for my loved ones. Lily decided to be a stay-at-home mom because she wanted to be there for every moment of Sean's early years, and she also wasn't a fan of daycare. I respected her choice completely. After all, family always comes first. As the sole provider, I take care of all the bills. I make sure that our little family has everything we need. But it doesn't stop there. I'm also heavily involved in household chores. I've spent countless hours cooking, cleaning, and looking after Sean. I cherish every second with him. I often find myself playing games, reading stories, or just cuddling up on the couch with him. I've also always believed in keeping the romance alive in our relationship. I make an effort to compliment Lily, plan date nights, and surprise her with little gestures of love. However, something changed after Sean was born. The spark that was present in our love life just died down. At first, I got it. She had just given birth, so naturally, she and the baby needed all the time and attention. During her pregnancy, I made sure to be there for her, looking out for her needs every step of the way. When Sean came into our lives, I was right there, supporting her through it all. But as time went on, I couldn't ignore the signs. Lily was pulling away, and it wasn't just exhaustion from caring for our newborn. While I was up late with Sean, comforting him and trying to be the best dad I could be, Lily seemed distant, almost always lost in her own thoughts. Her mood swings started getting worse, and it got me thinking about postpartum depression. I knew it could hit hard, and I wanted to help her through it. So I got her into therapy, thinking it would be a step in the right direction. However, my efforts seemed in vain when Lily refused to attend her therapy sessions. The first day I drove her there, but with Sean needing constant attention, I couldn't stay with her. To my shock, she never showed up for her session. Instead, she chose to wander aimlessly. I had to track her location to bring her home safely. She couldn't give me a straight answer, and despite getting her checked out, there were no signs of anything serious going mentally. It was tough seeing her struggle, but I did my best to support her, even when she pushed me away. After giving birth, Lily seemed to go downhill. She physically recovered fine, but mentally she was off. She just couldn't muster up the energy to do anything. I took on more and more around the house, looking after Sean and keeping things running while Lily seemed content to do nothing but lounge around. It was tough to watch. She used to be so involved, so lively, and now she was like a shadow of herself. I tried talking to her about getting help, about therapy, but she shut me down every time. The thought of therapy was a no-go for her, and she made it clear she wasn't interested in any kind of intervention. I wanted nothing more than to see Lily happy and vibrant again. Seeing her struggle with postpartum depression was very saddening and gut-wrenching, and I was determined to do whatever it took to lift her spirits. One of my suggestions was for her to consider going back to work, even if it meant taking on a low-paying job just to get out there and regain a sense of purpose. I thought it could be a positive change, something to focus on outside of our home life, and maybe even a chance for her to reconnect with her passions. But Lily was adamant in her refusal. She saw it as unnecessary pressure and said she preferred to stay at home despite the toll it was taking on her mental well-being. It was very hard for me to accept her decision, but I knew that I couldn't force her to do something she wasn't ready for. I respected her choice, even though I wished she would give it a chance, if only to see a little bit of her old self return. Then I noticed something. It was like I was living with two different people. When Lily was with her friends, she was outgoing, chatty, and full of life. But the moment she walked through our front door, it was like a switch flipped. She became distant, unresponsive, and it felt like there was a barrier between us that I couldn't break through. I tried talking to her about it, hoping to understand what was going on, but every time I brought it up, she would get defensive and angry. It was frustrating because I just wanted us to be open and honest with each other, but she would shut me out every time. It was tough seeing her so lively and social outside our home, yet so closed off and distant when we were together. I couldn't help but wonder what had changed and why she couldn't be the same person with me that she was with her friends. Things continued like that for a long while. In fact, it became the new normal, and I found myself getting used to the distance and numbness that had settled between us. I had tried every approach I could think of to bridge the gap, to understand what was going on with Lily, but nothing seemed to work. It was like banging my head against a wall with no progress in sight. But leaving wasn't an option, not with my son still being so little. I knew the courts would likely favor Lily for custody because of Sean's age, and I couldn't bear the thought of being separated from my son. So I stayed, hoping against hope that things would somehow get better. Plus, despite everything, there was still a part of me that loved Lily deeply. I wanted her to seek help, to find her way back to the vibrant woman I fell in love with. But she seemed stuck in this cycle of distance and temporary closeness. For about a year, maybe even 2, I noticed this pattern. Lily would be distant, almost unreachable, and I would start to withdraw my affections, feeling tired of the constant push and pull. It was then that she would suddenly become more attentive, more affectionate, as if sensing my distance. But it was always short-lived. Maybe for a few days she would be fine, then once she felt I was back on board, she would retreat into her shell again, leaving me feeling confused and frustrated. Then I noticed something, the first sign that made my stomach churn. She was spending a lot of time on her phone. Now I know that's usually the first sign people talk about when they suspect their partner might be cheating, whether emotionally or physically. The constant scrolling, the distant look in their eyes when they're glued to that screen. It all adds up to this sinking feeling in your gut. But back then, my mind didn't immediately jump to cheating. After all, Lily had been distant from me for a long time already. It was almost like a new normal for us, sadly. So when I saw her not only on her phone more than usual, but also being very secretive about it, a little alarm bell went off in my head, but I pushed it aside because I thought it was just another layer of her withdrawal from our relationship. I tried to brush off those uneasy feelings, thinking maybe it was just stress or her being preoccupied with something else. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, that lingering doubt wouldn't go away. It felt like there was this dark cloud hanging over us. I was seriously starting to question everything we had built together. Lily was never the type to be all overly protective or secretive about her phone. In fact, she was quite the opposite. She'd leave it lying around, forget where she put it, and I'd end up being the one to track it down or call it to find it. It was just one of those little quirks of hers that I found kind of endearing, and it had become a bit of a running joke between us, her carelessness with her phone. But then, out of nowhere, she became super protective of her phone, always checking it like she was waiting for something urgent, hiding it from me like it was some kind of top-secret document. It was like she had something to hide, and it didn't sit right with me. She started doing all these little things to keep me from seeing her phone or her messages, refusing to charge it in the same room as me, keeping it close by at all times and avoiding opening it up if I was around. It was like she was guarding it with her life, and it raised a red flag in my mind. Why was she building a wall between us? I just couldn't figure out why. Why was she being so secretive, especially when she had never been like that before? It felt like a breach of trust, a barrier between us that I couldn't break through no matter how hard I tried. The next stage of my suspicions came when I noticed that Lily was spending an unusual amount of time outside the house. Now I should mention that a significant change had already taken place in our lives. Like I mentioned before, Lily had become extremely tired and lazy, avoiding any household chores and leaving me to pick up the slack. This led to me cutting back on my hours at work and transitioning to remote work from home, which then allowed me to juggle taking care of Sean and managing the household chores without letting things pile up. That didn't mean that I worked 100% remote. I still went to the office, but about 70% of my work was done from home. So with me being home a lot, I couldn't help but notice Lily's frequent outings. Her excuses for leaving were becoming flimsier by the day. Sure, she used to go out with her friends occasionally, but now it seemed like she was always on the move, and her explanations just didn't add up. One red flag was her newfound interest in driving herself. Before, she would often rely on her friends to pick her up for a night out, especially since she wasn't much of a drinker. But now she was taking the wheel more often, which struck me as odd. I didn't think much of that, though, because I justified that it could have just been a coincidence. What if she wanted to drive herself more and I was suspecting her for nothing? Then when I checked her location, it was always at random places. Restaurants, clubs, you name it. At first, I tried to convince myself that she was just spending more time with her friends, even though it felt off. What added to my confusion was that she never turned off her location sharing, which made it seem like she had nothing to hide. But every time I tried to bring up my concerns, Lily would get defensive and turn it around on me. She accused me of being the one who wanted her to be more social, and now that she was, I was suddenly questioning her every move. It was frustrating and confusing, to say the least. One of the things that really caught my attention was how much money Lily was spending all of a sudden. It was way more than her usual spending habits, and whenever I asked her about it, she always had the same excuse. She decided to pay for everyone's drinks or treat everyone to dinner. It just didn't add up. Her friends were well off, and they were all used to splitting the bill equally or paying for what they ordered, to avoid any confusion or tension. So her sudden urge to foot the bill for everyone raised my eyebrow. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband that was constantly questioning her every move, so I just asked her to be mindful of her spending. But deep down, my suspicions were growing. What finally tipped me off was a chance encounter at the grocery store. Now, I usually did the grocery shopping because Lily hated it and I didn't mind it. On this particular day, I bumped into one of Lily's closest friends, someone who was always part of their friend group. We exchanged pleasantries and caught up briefly. It was during this conversation that she mentioned something that didn't sit right with me. She hadn't seen Lily in a while. This was strange because every time Lily went out, she would always mention she was with her friend group. So why hadn't her friend seen her lately? When I casually asked about it, she seemed confused, confirming that yes, Lily hadn't been hanging out with them lately. I brushed it off, not wanting to raise any suspicions, but it nagged at the back of my mind. When I got home, I mentioned the encounter to Lily, and she seemed surprised. It was almost like she hadn't expected me to run into her friend. She asked me what we talked about, but I just told her that all we did was exchange pleasantries. So I started checking Lily's location more frequently, something I hadn't done much before because her outings seemed innocent enough. Just restaurants and clubs, random places. But now, I was keeping a close eye on where she was going, trying to connect the dots and make sense of it all. Everything finally clicked. I had to admit my curiosity had reached its breaking point. I didn't want to be that overly suspicious husband, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. When Lily mentioned she'd be heading out to meet her friends, it was like a signal for me to act. I played it cool, telling her I'd be home working and that I had already arranged for my sister to come over and help with Sean or take him out to the park. My sister arrived, and I waited until Lily left the house before I made my move. I told my sister I needed to step out for a bit, quickly grabbed something, checked Lily's location, headed to the restaurant where she was supposed to be, and as soon as I walked in, I spotted her. She was there sitting with a guy. They were having dinner, but it wasn't just a friendly catch-up like she said, and these weren't the friends she told me she would be hanging out with. They were cozy, affectionate, and it hit me hard. I found a spot where I could watch without being seen, ordered something to blend in, and just observed. The way they interacted, it was clear they were more than just friends. My heart sank as I watched her spoon feed him. It was absolutely crazy. I was on the verge of tears. But what really tore me apart was when they started talking, though I couldn't make out their conversation. I watched as she got up and headed to the restroom, and he followed right after her. I didn't need a crystal ball or a fortune teller to know what was going down in that restroom. It was as clear as day the guy with my wife was the one she'd been messing around with. I was pouring my heart and soul into our marriage, doing everything I could to make things work, and all the while she was cheating on me. She was beyond crazy. I was shocked, hurt, in disbelief and angry. Part of me wanted to barge in there and make a scene, but I tried to keep a lid on my emotions. I settled the bill, then made my way to the restroom. I didn't even have to peek inside to figure out which stall they were in. The noises coming from there were pretty disgusting, but also made it clear what stall they were in. I knocked firmly on the stall door, and they went silent. My wife's voice nervously claimed the stall was occupied. It wasn't my proudest moment, but I couldn't hold back. I demanded she face me, but there was only silence from her end. It was like she recognized my voice and couldn't bring herself to respond. After some awkward silence, the guy in the stall asked who I was. I told him straight up that this was my wife they were with. He seemed taken aback, apologized, and spilled the beans that my wife had led him to believe she was divorced and so was just looking for a casual thing. We had this crazy conversation in that cramped restroom while my wife stayed hidden in the stall, too ashamed or shocked to come out. I was furious, and so was the guy she was with. He felt like he'd been played just like me. Meanwhile, my wife stayed holed up in that stall, probably too ashamed or stunned to face what was happening. Realizing I was wasting my time waiting for her to come out, I decided to leave. I told her I'd be at home and that she needed to collect her stuff. That got her moving. Now she was trying to go after me and beg, but I wasn't about to stick around for any drama. I would have taken my car keys right then if I hadn't driven alone. I had been the one to pay for all our cars. Back home, my sister saw the storm brewing inside me. She knew something was off, and I spilled everything to her. She was shocked and angry on my behalf because she knew how hard I'd been working for our family. We both agreed we couldn't keep this quiet. My wife's actions needed to be known. I asked my sister to help pack her things. I didn't want her setting foot in our home anymore. My sister was on board, so while she did that, I started making calls. I called up my in-laws, my own family, and our friends, telling them what went down. I didn't wait for their reactions or advice. I just wanted everyone to know what had happened. The moment I finished calling as many people as I could, I switched my phone to Do Not Disturb mode and joined my sister in packing up the rest of my wife's belongings. We swiftly gathered them and tossed them out onto the porch, then locked the door. Less than 5 minutes later, my wife arrived, tears streaming down her face, begging for forgiveness. But it was too late. She had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I, however, had to come out to retrieve the car keys from my wife, and it was quite a scene. She initially resisted and tried to withhold them from me. I had to stand my ground firmly and inform her that I would call the cops if necessary, and eventually she relented and handed over the keys. I told her there was no chance for reconciliation and that I wanted her to leave. This angered her, and she started hurling insults and blame my way. Can you believe it? She blamed me for being vindictive, for not waiting even a day before exposing her actions to everyone. I didn't engage with her accusations. Instead, I ignored her while she stayed outside, screaming for hours on end. I'm even surprised my neighbors didn't call the cops for a noise complaint. My sister couldn't leave because we were scared my wife might attack her, so she stayed the night with me. Despite the circumstances, I was glad for the company. Sean, of course, is a kid and doesn't even understand what's going on. I don't want to burden Sean with the knowledge of his mother's infidelity, but I also can't bear the thought of letting her have custody. So I have turned to Reddit to share my story, to vent my frustrations and seek solace, and also get any helpful advice that you all can dish out. I've given my all to my family, worked hard, been there through thick and thin. To be repaid with betrayal cuts deep. I've been a loving husband, a responsible provider, and more. Yet she sought something else, and that stings. It's a painful truth to accept. Update. Hey Reddit, the response I received after posting my story was overwhelming in a good way. I wasn't expecting such an outpouring of love and support from strangers on the internet. I've been trying to read and respond to all the comments and DMs, but there's been a lot, so please bear with me if I haven't gotten to yours yet. The support means a lot to me, more than I can express. I will make sure I go through every single comment and direct message. It's been a week since I shared my story, so I should have updated sooner. I am so sorry, but here's the update. The morning after I posted, when I woke up, I noticed my wife had already left. She left and took her stuff. Surprisingly, she had paid for an Uber and booked a hotel room, which I found out from checking our joint account. I immediately cleared out the joint account to prevent any further use of our money. That is something I should have done earlier. I've also received calls and messages from various people, including her mother. Her mom apologized profusely and expressed disbelief at her daughter's actions. She asked if I could forgive her daughter, but I made it clear that I couldn't forgive such betrayal. My mom and siblings also reached out, expressing concern for me, and I reassured them that I was coping. Interestingly, none of her friends or family members were willing to let her stay with them, which is why she ended up at a hotel. Even her closest friends refused to take her in, which surprised me. I also noticed that she hasn't stopped sharing her location with me, confirming that she's still at the hotel. My sister, who had initially gone home, returned to stay with me for support. It's comforting to have her around during this tough time. I also received a missed call from one of her friends, the one I ran into at the grocery store. I haven't called back yet, but I'll update once I do or if anything significant happens. I also wanted to address some of the frequent comments I've been receiving. First off, yes, I've seen a lot of "you're stupid" comments, and you know what? I agree. I made a mistake by trusting her blindly, and I won't make that mistake again. It's a hard lesson learned, but one I won't forget. And for those of you advising to lawyer up, rest assured I'm in the process of getting legal advice. I will not be navigating this situation without professional guidance. Regarding comments speculating about my wife's mental health, some have suggested she might be bipolar. While I don't believe she is, I'm not dwelling on it anymore. That's something she needs to figure out on her own because I genuinely do not care. That's her own problem now. There were also comments about me being too complacent, especially regarding her becoming a stay-at-home mom. I get where you're coming from, and in hindsight, it's easy to see the warning signs. But at the time, I never anticipated things would turn out this way. I do take full responsibility for the situation. Overall, I appreciate all the feedback, even the tough love. It's helped me see things from different perspectives and make better decisions moving forward. Thanks to everyone who has offered support and advice during this challenging time. It's been a very challenging time, but knowing that there are people who care means a lot to me. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a while. Life's been a roller coaster, but I'm hanging in there. So after the initial chaos settled down, my ex-wife went into full drama mode. She called me up, screaming like a banshee about the joint account. It was like a broken record, her playing the victim while conveniently forgetting her own actions and the fact that she ruined everything for herself. I let her vent, mostly because I wanted to keep records of her craziness like my lawyer had advised. Then she started texting. Threats, insults, even some pathetic attempts at reconciliation. I didn't bother replying. I've learned not to engage with crazy people. Instead, I kept screenshots from my lawyer. Court's going to love this. When she got served with the divorce papers, oh boy, that was a show. She called me furious, yelling about how I was actually going through with it, as if I was supposed to stay in a toxic mess. I couldn't help but laugh. I'm finally breaking free from a manipulative cheat. Regret? Yeah, right. I've been stuck in a manipulative, loveless marriage for years because I stupidly thought we could work through it. And now that I was finally going to be free, I'd regret it, hell no. Family and friends have been checking in, but they've toned it down a bit. They are no longer calling and texting as crazily as they were before, which is quite a relief. They do check up on me occasionally and have talked to me about asking them for any kind of support if I need it. I really appreciate them a lot. My sister has been my rock. She isn't staying with me permanently anymore, but she always pops by when I need a break or just someone to talk to. It's good to have that support. Now here's a question I've noticed that keeps popping up frequently in my DMs in the comment section. Everyone keeps asking about her affair partner. Truth is, I know nada, zip, zilch. I met the guy once on the day when I confronted her in the restaurant. That was the first and last time. Never seen him before, never want to see him again. I guess he realized she's got a talent for deception too, claiming she was single as she had been recently divorced. Crazy, right? So yeah, don't bother asking about him. He's as much a mystery to me as he is to you all, and I'd like for him to remain a mystery. Life's moving on, slowly but surely. I'm focusing on Sean, on rebuilding, and yeah, even on myself. It's a journey, but I'm taking it one step at a time. Thanks for all the support and understanding, Reddit. You guys rock. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a journey and I'm finally wrapping up this chapter of my life. I meant to update earlier, but life got busy, and honestly, I'm relieved this chapter is closing. I'm not used to regularly updating on Reddit, so this feels like a weight off my shoulders. So the court saga happened. I got custody of my son, Sean. That's the silver lining in all of this. My ex-wife got alimony, a token for her time as a stay-at-home mom, I guess. It wasn't much, thankfully, thanks to our state's laws taking her infidelity into account. It irritated me a bit that she got anything at all, but at least it's not substantial enough to change her life drastically. On the bright side, I got to keep everything else. House, assets, you name it. It's a relief to have that stability for Sean and me. During the whole legal ordeal, my ex never once asked about Sean. That spoke volumes, and my lawyer made sure to highlight that in court. She was too busy drifting between begging me to take her back and hurling insults at me. After the judge laid down the verdict, my ex-wife seemed to finally realize the magnitude of what she had lost. She caught me outside the courtroom, crying and begging for a chance to talk. I heard her out briefly, but I knew deep down that words wouldn't change anything, plus there was a huge chance her tears were all fake, and she was just trying to manipulate me. I quickly made my way out, not wanting her emotional breakdown to create a scene. It's a tricky situation. I can't just block and cut her off completely because of our co-parenting responsibilities. As much as I wanted to distance myself, I have to stay connected for Sean's sake. On the bright side, these interactions remind me about why the divorce was necessary and keep me in the loop about her life falling apart. I've been focusing on myself and Sean a lot. Family and friends have been my pillars. They keep making sure I never feel alone. Their support means the world to me. Things have been surprisingly chill lately, given the storm I've weathered. It's a testament to the strength I've found within myself and the amazing support system around me. To everyone here, thank you for the love, understanding, and advice. You've been incredible. I might just retire this account and go back to my main. But before I do, a massive shout out to all of you. You rock!